What happens when absolute power falls into the hands of someone who no longer fears consequences or reality itself? Imagine a ruler who doesn't just command armies or pass laws, but believes he is above humanity entirely. A man who doesn't want loyalty. He wants submission. Not respect, but fear. Ancient Rome didn't have to imagine this. It lived through it. His name was Caligula. And for 4 years, the most powerful empire on earth belonged to a man many believed had lost his mind. But he wasn't born that way. Before the madness, before the cruelty, before the fear that spread through Rome like a shadow, he was a child people loved. He was born in 12 AD in the coastal town of Antium. His real name was Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus. He came from a bloodline that carried the weight of Rome itself. His father, Germanicus, was one of the most admired generals in the empire. Soldiers adored him. The people trusted him. Many believed he would one day become emperor. As a child, Gaius traveled with the army. His mother dressed him in a miniature soldier's uniform, complete with small boots. The soldiers laughed, cheered, and gave him a nickname, Caligula, Little Boots. It was a name given with affection. But that warmth didn't last. When he was just 7 years old, his father died suddenly while on campaign. Rumors spread through Rome. Poison, betrayal, politics. His mother, Agrippina the Elder, believed it was no accident. She spoke openly, too openly. In Rome, that was dangerous. Soon, the family that once stood at the center of power became a threat to it. Exile followed. Arrests, disappearances. One by one, the people closest to him were removed. Caligula grew up watching his family fall apart. Not in battle, but through fear, suspicion, and silent orders. By the time he was a teenager, he had learned something most people never have to understand. In Rome, survival didn't belong to the strongest. It belonged to the most careful. Eventually, he was taken to the island of Capri, where the Emperor Tiberius lived in isolation. There, Caligula didn't resist. He adapted. He watched. He listened. He stayed quiet. He learned how power worked behind closed doors. And most importantly, he learned how dangerous it was to be noticed. When Tiberius died in 37 AD, Caligula, only 24 years old, was suddenly at the center of the empire. And Rome welcomed him. Crowds filled the streets. Soldiers pledged loyalty. The Senate approved him without hesitation. To them, he wasn't a risk. He was the son of a hero. For a brief moment, everything seemed right. He lowered taxes, freed prisoners, rewarded the army, hosted games that brought life back into the city.
Rome celebrated.
But something changed. A serious illness struck him just months into his rule. Ancient sources describe a fever, a collapse, a moment where his life nearly ended. He survived, but the man who returned felt different. After that, Caligula began to speak and act in ways no emperor ever had before. He didn't present himself as chosen by the gods. He presented himself as one of them. He dressed as Jupiter, built temples in his own name, ordered statues to resemble him. He demanded something no ruler before him had fully claimed. Not loyalty, worship. The Senate, once powerful, became something else entirely. A stage. He forced respected men to run beside his chariot, to perform, to obey without question, not because he needed their service, but because he wanted to prove he didn't. Power, to Caligula, wasn't about governing. It was about control, about showing, again and again, that nothing stood above his will. He spent enormous wealth on displays of excess, lavish banquets, grand constructions, and spectacles designed to remind everyone of one thing. He could do whatever he wanted, and no one would stop him. One of the most famous symbols of this was his horse, Incitatus. He gave it a marble stable, decorated it with luxury, treated it with a level of attention that shocked even the elite. And then, according to ancient writers like Suetonius, he suggested something unthinkable, that the horse could be made a consul of Rome. Whether this was madness or mockery, Historians still debate. But the message was clear. If a horse could hold power, then the Senate meant nothing. Fear spread through the empire. Not just fear of punishment, but fear of unpredictability. No one knew what would happen next. And when people live long enough under that kind of uncertainty, something changes. Silence replaces loyalty, and fear turns into something else. Resentment. By 41 AD, that resentment reached the very people closest to him. Members of the Praetorian Guard, the same force that protected him, turned against him. In a narrow corridor, away from the crowds and spectacle, the emperor who believed himself untouchable was confronted. And in that moment, absolute power met its limit. Caligula was killed after just 4 years on the throne. No grand battlefield. No heroic ending. Just a sudden, quiet collapse of everything he had built. History remembers him in many ways. Some say he was mad. Others say he was fully aware of what he was doing, pushing power to its extreme to prove a point. But regardless of the reason, one thing remains clear. He turned the greatest empire in the world into a place ruled not by law, but by fear. And in the end, fear did what no army could. It ended him.